All right, we are live with the webinar. We'll give another minute or so for people to get logged in and settled in so that we can get this underway. So if you're on the line, just another maybe 30 seconds or so before we start. All right, we'll just get started with the intros. So Acorn, we were founded right around Groundhog's Day. So every year we celebrate our founding with a webinar. We took the inspiration from Southwest, where if you're on their flight on Valentine's Day, you get free booze. We're not at a point yet where we're able to give everyone we interact with free booze, but maybe we'll get there in the future. So, today's Groundhog Day. Punxsutawney Phil said there'd be 6 more weeks of winter, which gives us 6 more weeks to spend time learning about eDiscovery. Today, we're focusing on addressing the need for eDiscovery staff with technical expertise and bridging the gap between the staff that's generally available in the market and the needs of people like law firms and corporations and government entities that need to use those staff. I have with me today Joseph Anderson, who is the Director of Information Technology at Miller Johnson, which is a firm in Michigan. Joseph's background is much more impressive than his self-written write-up would lead you to believe. He's been in an informational technology role at several large law firms, and most recently he comes from a long career at IBM, most recently where he was working on IBM Watson and healthcare applications. Joseph joined Miller Johnson about 2 years ago to implement a strategy of working with eDiscovery at his law firm amongst other IT needs. And over the past couple of years of working with him, I've been very impressed with his ability to think strategically about eDiscovery and to be able to drive change at his organization and with his clients, which is why I invited him to speak today, to share his experience and see what other folks in the industry might be able to take away from what he's done and where he's been successful. I'm Leah, I'm the CEO of Acorn, and I founded Acorn about 5 years ago because I felt like the eDiscovery industry could really benefit from a lot of the rigorous project management practices that I had used in the aerospace industry. And so I founded Acorn to deliver really, truly exceptional customer service and quality of customer service by using those techniques from the aerospace industry. With that, why we chose to speak on this topic today is this was driven by the State of the Industry report from eDiscovery today. So periodically, they ask a number of industry participants a number of questions about the eDiscovery industry. And most recently, participants in the survey were asked, what are the largest eDiscovery business trends in 2022? And what I thought was very interesting is that 17% of respondents said that they were concerned about staffing shortages. And this isn't the largest number. By far, people were much more concerned about consolidation and expansion of sort of what is an eDiscovery service into other things like data privacy and information governance. But I chose to focus on the staffing piece because this is much more relevant to the work that Acorn does and things that we can control and things that we can help our clients control and manage around this issue. So with that, I'm hoping that this discussion today is very conversational. And so I think you're going to be really interested to hear what Joseph has to say. And so Joseph, why don't you give us a little bit of background on what brought you to Miller Johnson and what you do, what you've done since you got there?
So kind of, I go in the way back machine. So back in college and right after college, I worked for the Attorney General's office in Minnesota. And then I went to the University of Denver College of Law and got a master's degree in legal administration. So this was going to be my career. And then I started working for law firms in the DC area, and I ended up at Jones Day. And one of the things that I was tasked to do was to help with the tobacco litigation from an eDiscovery perspective. And back then, we didn't have relativity. Most of the reviews were done manually on paper, and we uploaded stuff into the computer, and everything was synopsis of the document. So we weren't doing full text searching, we weren't OCRing anything. It was back in the way back days. And then, as you noted, I went to IBM and kind of took a career turn for 20 odd years. And then 2 years ago, I decided that I wanted, 3 years ago now, I decided that I wanted to go back in the legal industry. So I started looking for a firm about the size of Miller Johnson. We have about 110, 115 attorneys, and go back into the technology space within a law firm. And that's kind of how I got here at Miller Johnson. When I joined as the director of IT, we had a eDiscovery practice that consisted of one project manager working on one case, professionally actually managing in relativity. And then we had a handful of paralegals who were working in relativity and working with the discovery, but not doing it as their main function and goal. So one of the things that my boss, Betsy Raymond, said was, hey, can you take over this function and grow it within the firm and take better advantage of the relationships that we have with vendors like Acorn and accelerate our eDiscovery usage within the firm and expand it. And so I believe right around February of 2020, the eDiscovery function was folded underneath me. And at the time it was one individual and a handful of paralegals. And I think at the time we had 4 cases. So it wasn't a thriving eDiscovery business at that time or service within the firm. And that's kind of where we got to with eDiscovery. And then it was interesting. We were talking, and everybody knows that you have like a preliminary discussion about topics like this. And we were talking about it last week. Within the firm, there really wasn't an established process for dealing with vendors like Acorn, dealing with cases, evaluating cases, a structured way to put together the documentation, a structured way to pull in all the relevant information. We had data rooms, and we dump everything in the data room and then dump it down to a shared drive. And there was no thought about how we were going to produce the documents. There was just, we have to get it into relativity. We have to do the searches. Oops, we did something wrong. Okay, dump everything out. Let's put it back in. Okay, let's hope that we do it right this time. So one of the things that we did is we partnered with Acorn to grow consistency and some standards, and we applied those standards across all of our vendors. So now when we come in, we have a new case. We're going through a standardized process. We're actually filling out the documentation. We're actually looking at what we need to produce before we put it in relativity, so that we don't have to redo work. But one of the biggest things about that, and we talked about it last week, is we had one paralegal who was doing the discovery work, and that's not scalable. If you get one big case, then all that time is taken away, and there's really no way to expand eDiscovery within the firm. So what I did was I entered into an agreement to allow for some flexibility and growth within the project management side of relativity. When we brought that individual on, it was for 20 hours a week, and we had the ability to go up, and obviously if we didn't use 20 hours, we're still paying for it. But that was less of a review, but more of a staff augmentation directly in the project management of the eDiscovery cases. And that gave us a great advantage to expand the number of cases and actually create some education and do some promotion within the firm, going to different individuals within the firm and saying, hey, what about that case? And what about this case? And as they were bringing things forward, but we were kind of, and we've had this conversation before. We kind of got stuck on price. So as a firm, we were able to bridge the personnel aspect of it, but then we got into the price aspect of it, and getting an attorney to look at the value of eDiscovery. Sometimes it's very easy, and sometimes it's very difficult. So, if anybody on the call wants to talk to Acorn and Leah about the small case, some option that Miller Johnson's taken advantage of, we were able to work and partner with Acorn to create a model where we could actually bring smaller cases in to the relativity space. And by bringing in those smaller cases, one of the advantages that we saw was we could introduce eDiscovery and relativity to more practices within the firm. So when I took over in February of 2020 of the eDiscovery practice, if somebody would have told me that the general counsel would be using it for an internal investigation on something, and a real estate partner would be using eDiscovery, and that we would have 25 to 30 cases up from 4, I would have thought, no way. But we've been able to, with partnerships with Acorn and other vendors, and with the growth in adoption within the firm, we've actually been able to spread eDiscovery and the use of relativity across the entire firm, which has been great. Now we're kind of at a situation where we have enough work for probably more paralegals to get involved. But as you noted, it's hard to find people that have the skills and want to be invested in relativity and the eDiscovery practice, and to keep them around. So that's really, and probably more than you wanted me to say, but that has been our journey over the last almost 2 years, getting from just a handful of cases, one very large case, to now just a large number of small and medium-sized cases, with the understanding that if a larger case were to come in tomorrow, we'd be able to tackle it and handle it. And as smaller cases and smaller use cases come up, we're able to reach out and deliver for our attorneys. And perfect example, we just had an attorney come forward and say, hey, somebody's asking for this information. How do I give it to them? And I was able to reach out to the eDiscovery project manager and say, here you go. And he was able to send over the forms and send over the standardized process and say, this is what we need to get. This is what we need to harvest. These are the searches that we need to do. Here's how we need to produce it. And now we're going to bring that case in within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So it's a great opportunity. I found it a great opportunity partnering with companies like Acorn to be able to expand eDiscovery and actually offer the tools at the right time in the right place, rather than sending an attorney to the document management system and have them click next and scroll through documents. It's nice to be able to leverage the power of relativity.
So you started in a situation where you had one dedicated paralegal for eDiscovery and maybe 4 cases. And then you discovered that through a combination of by actually adding more capacity by working with a provider, you discovered that there was a need for more than 4 cases to be used. So it kind of ended up in the situation where the more staff you had added, the more need you had for more staff.
Well, I'm not sure if it was more staff, but the flexibility that Acorn was able to bring to the table in terms of the model of us being able to interact with relativity. We went from a situation where if I went to an attorney and said, we're going to put it in relativity and we're going to, the eDiscovery paralegal is going to reach out and we're going to put it in that platform, there were 4 or 5 attorneys who are currently using the system who, when I brought it to them a year and a half ago, said, my client will never pay for that. I've always reviewed it manually. My LAA can do it. I can find a paralegal to do it. And over time, just saying, hey, we can do this for you. We can get this in. This is it. And the paralegals have been able to actually reach out to them, the eDiscovery paralegals, and say, hey, we'll teach you how to do your own searches. We'll teach you how to pull documents out of it. We can work with Josh at Acorn to get it. We have an hour and a half. We can work because we've worked through that process before, and we're doing it the right way. We can get that up there, and we can start executing. And I think that's really the value, that to show the broader breadth of the firm that, hey, it's not just a big case litigation tool, although it's great for big cases and litigation, but that's not the only thing that it can be used for. It can, anytime somebody says in an employment matter or a labor matter, we need to look at all the emails that this individual has received and sent for the last 2 years. Some people would say, well, we'll just read through them all. We can do that. We can do some key searches in Outlook and find that. But when you actually put it into relativity and you start using near-term searches and being able to really get in there and find the information, it really enhances how you can deliver. And the partnership with you has made it financially feasible for some of those cases to get over that edge. And my hope is, now that they're using the tool, when the bigger cases or the medium-sized cases come in, they will continue the process towards leveraging relativity.
I see. So our pricing is not secret, by the way. We publicly promote this. So you're on our small case solution, which is, you can host up to 10 gigabytes in a relativity environment, and it's $250 per user per month. And so you used that when you were sort of getting your eDiscovery program off the ground. You use that to give comfort to the attorneys and say things like, what if I tell you this only costs $250 to get put in relativity, and I could put it there in 6 hours and have it ready for you? That's what drove the early interest. And now that your attorneys have seen relativity and seen what it can do, or any other eDiscovery tools through that sort of small purchase initial introduction, now you're getting more interest in using it more broadly.
Correct.
Right.
And I think that's actually grown, because out of that small case model, we now have some medium size and some larger cases, and we just engaged with Acorn on a review, a case review in the last couple of weeks. And part of that is the comfort level. First, we got to put it into relativity. So we got the small cases, we got more people involved, more people using it, more people comfortable with it. Then the medium case comes in, and we look at, okay, how are we going to handle the review of this? Do we actually have the ability to do this in-house? Maybe, but it would be a stretch. So then that offers the opportunity to reach out to Acorn and say, hey, can you do this review for us? And you were able to do the review and produce what we needed to. And that just adds upon the layers that Acorn as a provider can bring to the table. I can't bring in a new paralegal every time we get a case. I mean, it's just not feasible. So I've tried to staff at a level where we can grow and kind of maintain, but we're not going to be able to, take on a case that has, a gigabyte worth of information, 100 gigs worth of information that has to be gone through in the next, 10 days. I can't staff up for that because that's not going to be something that's going to happen every week. So, then we get into that kind of partnership range where Acorn can bring people to do that review to the table. And because of the goodwill and the comfort and everything that we've done through growing the use of the platform, now we can leverage the further tools that Acorn can bring to the table and expand for us.
Yeah, and have you thought about expanding your in-house eDiscovery talent, like bringing in a dedicated project manager instead of using Acorn's team for that?
So we have one, and we're growing his skills. So we have an individual, and we're growing his skills, and he's talked about getting some certification and really growing that. Then we have a part-time, a contractor that's doing it. And the hope is that at some point we can get the volume up to where I can go and say, hey, I have enough work to cover, the next 10 cases that come in, or the next 20 cases that come in. It's going to break us. So we have to add on, and whether it's adding on through an arrangement with, let's say, Acorn, where you provide some of that bursting. So that's always the hard part in technology. Everybody wants everything to be perfect all the time, but you have those bursts, and whether it's traffic on the internet or computing power, or in this case, people power in terms of relativity and eDiscovery, I can't justify having 3 project managers if I'm only going to have enough work for 3 project managers for 4 months out of the year. And I either have to find something else for them to do, or I have to enter into strategic partnerships like I've chosen to do, to augment that up and down time that we end up seeing within the space.
Yeah, I think eDiscovery talent is very niche. So it's hard to find somebody that's really good at eDiscovery or really good at relativity, but can also be like a multifunctional tool and do non-relativity stuff. And so like finding the balance between, do I outsource the specialty skill or bring that in-house is I think a lot of what's contributing to the labor problem in the market. I have I have some information to share with the audience on this topic. So if we look at the market, one thing that I think is very interesting is, when we look at how big of a factor this lack of eDiscovery personnel has been over time. Am I sharing? Sorry, make sure I'm sharing the correct screen. Can you guys see my PowerPoint? Yep, I'll assume so. Joseph, can you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. So when we look at the lack of eDiscovery personnel over time and how big of a factor this has been, we can see that, in the survey over the past 2 years, this hasn't really been an issue. And it's becoming more and more of an issue at a faster and faster rate, over the course of the last year. This is sort of, in my view, driven by there's a limited pool of talent. There's only about 2,000 relativity certified administrators in the whole world. And you compare that to the 13,000 corporations, government agencies, and law firms using relativity, and the over 180,000 users, and the math starts to get upside down really quickly. We're growing people that use relativity and need relativity a lot faster than we're growing relativity experts. And so like that creates math that's really hard to get out of. And you compare this to, you can see this in the market. So you can see that in 2019, 2020, the use of relativity or eDiscovery services was pretty flat. But then in 2021, there was about a 20% increase in terms of the amount of need for eDiscovery services. And the talent pool is not growing that fast. It takes a really long time to train somebody to become a relativity expert in a sort of meaningful capacity. And the need is growing faster than our ability to train them. And then also the people that are trained and able to do this service are leaving eDiscovery to go into other careers like data breach and cybersecurity and information governance. And so this is like a real challenge in terms of technology and labor around eDiscovery and sort of being able to match the demand. So with that said, you know, we talked about the small case solution as a way to sort of get around that issue, right? So if an average case, you know, if you can make it more self-service and more standard and less reliant on an expert to coach the end user on how to work with it, that's one way to sort of be able to use eDiscovery more without needing to increase your eDiscovery expertise more. What are some other examples of things you've done to make sure that you're being really efficient with the technical time that you have? You know, you've mentioned you've really thought about standardizing your workflow and standardizing your communications with your providers.
So I think the biggest thing that we've done, or that the team has done, is we've tried to standardize everything. So when, you know, and I've had these conversations with members of your team talking about my team. You know, the comment came early on in the process of this transformation for us that when somebody would reach out from Miller Johnson, they would get some of the information. It wouldn't be all, and there was some coaching, and so, you know, it wasn't something that they were doing all the time. And I think dedicating one person, two people, you know, one is a contractor, to only doing that part of the function. Every time a new case comes in, we're able to package it up and move it forward in a consistent model. And that just saves time for everybody. And the right questions are being asked. And I think that's the key for me, is you have to have somebody who understands eDiscovery and is professional in it and has those processes baked, but can ask the question, what are you going to do with the data, and how are you going to get the data out? You know, what do we have to produce as the end result of what we're doing? And then to work with your team, or the eDiscovery providers team, to make sure that how the data gets put in there, how the data is processed, allows for the production on the back end. When I first took over, we were in the middle, and it was relatively small. I think it was, no pun intended, relatively. But it was, I think it was like a 8 or 9 gig matter. I mean, it wasn't huge. But the interesting part was we had ingested it 3 times. Like, we put it up there, so something happened, somebody made a mistake, or the bait stamp was applied incorrectly and they produced it, it was wrong. Then we had to put it back in, and then something else happened. And then our eDiscovery project manager said, you know, I'm done. I'm doing this myself, and took it end to end. And that's really when I saw the value, when that was being described to me, that we ended up spending 2.5 months getting a production out because of just mistakes on the front end. And when I say they're mistakes, they're not really mistakes. It's just the right questions weren't asked in the right timing to make sure that the production was right on the back end. And I think that's the biggest thing in terms of saving time and creating a partnership with a vendor like we have with Acorn is, are we asking those right questions? Are we getting the data over correctly? Are we getting the data in the system correctly? And now are we working with the data correctly and producing it? And if we can save that time and that energy and eventually that cost that we have to write off, then that's where the real win is for us, in my opinion.
When I was in the aerospace industry, I was introduced to the term cost of poor quality. And, you know, I worked at Parker Hannifin, and there were literally engineers, and their job was to figure out if we get, and this isn't a real example, this is illustrative, but if we get cheap steel from China versus expensive steel from Germany, and, you know, the Chinese steel is really good, but not perfect, and the German steel is perfect. What's the cost of poor quality, and how does that compare to the cost savings on the sort of raw materials? And that idea in my mind was like really eye-opening, because poor quality, when you factor in the expense of rework, can be really, really expensive in ways that you don't expect. And time consuming. And when you don't have like project managers, you know, time is actually more expensive than money.
Yeah, and that's the big thing, is it all drives costs and it all drives client satisfaction. And if we can get some, and in the small case model, we actually, no, I don't want to put it in there. No, I don't want to put it in there. No, I don't want to put it in there. All right, put it in there. Then every month we go to them. Is it time to decommission that? No, I want to keep that. No, I want to keep that. And it's been like, so it's that whole process of, you know, bad experience. Now it's a good experience. Now it's efficient. Now it's searchable. It's, hey, I can go back to that real quickly. You know, the traditional model would have been, you know, let's say $1,000 a month versus $250 a month. We, in the end, never would have got them in at 1,000, but now I know that the next thing that comes up, it's going to be going in, and even if it's not going in this small case model, but it's going in as a regular, I know that it's going to go into eDiscovery, and I know that the firm's going to be protected, and I know that the processes are going to be in place to gain that value from it. And I think that's the most important thing, is understanding how you can drive that value and get that value out of the space, and how we can deliver that to our clients. Because I think that's, at the end, that's all we want to do, is we want to drive a better experience and a better value for our clients. Because if we can get something in, do what we need to do, and you know, put it out on the back end in the right way, then everybody's happy. And I'm actually going through some of the end of 2021 client perspective from an eDiscovery aspect, and one of the clients said, that was fantastic, thank you for all your help. And the attorney response to that, to the eDiscovery project manager here at Miller Johnson, was, getting praise out of that individual is very tough, and it happens very infrequently. So congratulations, that was great. So it's kind of that partnership that we can build up, and we can build that value with the clients. It just adds value to the firm. And I think that's what eDiscovery here at Miller Johnson has become. It's become a valuable tool for the firm to take advantage of.
Yeah, I want to keep an eye on time. I'm happy to stay on and keep talking if anybody attending the webinar wants to keep listening. I will wrap this up as well if anybody has to jump. I'm sorry, I keep clicking on the wrong screen to share. Okay. I think the takeaways, as Joseph and I talked about this topic and prepared for this discussion today, I think the takeaways are, you know, there is a real challenge around the limitation of technology, access to technology, to individuals with the technology expertise. The truth is we're in a position in the industry where there's more work than there is people that know how to do it. And so the only ways out of this catch-22 are to, you know, try to find ways to get the work done with people that don't need expertise, and, you know, self-service capabilities of tools is certainly part of that, as is a workshop, which, Joseph, after I wrap up, I want to get your thoughts on how you thought the workshop went. But workshops to train attorneys to be more self-service in their own relativity environment will help ease the demand on the technical talent. Standardized workflows save time with rework, and they let you do more with the limited talent that we have. And adopting a partnership model, so understanding when, you know, we frequently find a vendor like might be able to do the work in a half hour that an internal person might take 3 hours to do. And that's just a function of that person at the vendor does that same thing all the time. So they're highly specialized and have a high level of expertise in that one task. And so there's a way to trade work and structure work so that it's very efficient. And finally, review is a huge source of actually savings on the technical talent time, because we found that when our team can control both the review and the project management is more efficient. There's less back and forth between the reviewers and the project managers. So those are all avenues to do more with less if you're finding yourself constrained on technical talent. If you want to do a workshop, we do workshops and CLEs, and the information is up here. So if you sign up for the webinar for 30 minutes and you want to drop, now's a good time to. If you want to stick around, Joseph, I do want to hear your thoughts on whether you felt like the workshop we did for your firm contributed to sort of your use of eDiscovery, your improvement of services, your ability to be more efficient.
So I think the workshop was well received, and we unfortunately only had a couple of attorneys that attended it, and the 2 attorneys that attended it got a lot of value out of it, and actually it drove some interest in bringing cases into relativity. I just talked to Zeph. I wasn't supposed to say his name, but I said his name. We just talked about doing another one in March. And that's something that I want to get back into, because I found that was very helpful, getting hands-on and doing something different and using the tool set in a different way to look at it from a different perspective. I think we got a tremendous value out of that. And I think it's been so long since we did it. I think we need to refresh it, and it's something that we need to do a little more often. Just as a side note, here in the firm, what the eDiscovery team has done is they've actually created 4 videos, and starting with the next class of new associates that come in, they're actually going to go through all across the board, not just litigation associates. They're all going to go through eDiscovery and relativity training. They're going to understand what capabilities we have, how to use the tools, how to manage productions, getting information into the tools and producing on the back end, as well as all the different technologies that we can use in terms of searching. So I'm hoping that accelerates the growth of eDiscovery within the firm, and the partnership with the seminar was great. Like I said, there wasn't an individual that came away from it and said that was a bad thing or that was a waste of my time. In fact, a couple of people were like, I wish I had more time to complete a couple of the sections of it. So it was great.
Yeah, and the seminar took the format from our context. It was something we were really excited to develop and offer, and it was something we were planning to do before COVID hit. And so the concept was always, you know, it's easy to talk about hard eDiscovery, but it's hard to understand it until you've like kind of felt it with your fingers. And so we had designed a workshop, and this is what you did, where, you know, attorneys basically, or lit support folks or paralegals or whoever needs access to this, they basically go through a very simple beginning to end workflow of like, I have a case set up, I do ECA, I do some clusters, I run some searches, I review a couple documents, and then I'm out. Like I don't do the processing, the loading, the production. It's the in the workspace experience. And we adapted that to be delivered remotely. And so using Zoom, you know, we had people virtually working side by side with our project managers, which is different than probably other training that you've considered and that you've done, right?
Yeah.
And I guess I'd be curious for your thoughts on how effective you think that approach is versus other approaches.
Well, I thought it was a great approach. I actually sat in on the training. I probably held everybody up because I fat fingered about 80% of what I was supposed to do. But I actually thought it was provided tremendous value. And I like that approach because it got, rather than just seeing it and, you know, having somebody review it. So all the training that we have is really so that the first time they sit in front of relativity, it's not a completely new experience to them. And that's really the only training that you can provide unless it's hands-on. And that was the great part about the seminar and the format that it was presented. It was actually, hi, I'm a user. I'm going in, I'm looking at the data. My hands are on the keyboard. I'm doing the searches. I'm doing the processing. It's me doing it versus I'm watching somebody do it or show me how to do it. And I'm only doing one out of the 10 modules. It was doing all of the modules. So I think it was very effective for our organization. I think that model of training works out best, the hands on the keyboard and actually doing it themselves rather than just looking at it. But if you don't have the ability to do that or the time to do that, to get people in, we found the next best alternative was to make sure that they saw it as an easy, you know, not experienced it as easy, but saw it as an easy tool and something that they could be comfortable with before they had an opportunity to touch it.
Yeah, you've done a lot with eDiscovery at your firm. And I'm curious, was there ever like an aha moment where you woke up and you're like, eDiscovery is like this and I need to change it, or it needs to be like that, or I've got this vision of where I want to take this? Or was it more like a kind of incremental improvement?
Well, I think the first thing was I took over the eDiscovery team and it was a team of one. And you know, we had just came out of a huge case and he was burnt out. And how do I add quality of life? And how do I enhance what he's doing and how he looks at things? So it was more of, from a personnel perspective, how do I make this easier? And then once we got that going and that process going, really the aha moment was that moment in time where I could say, I was ahead of the game. And that was, we had two of our members came to me, two of our partners came to me and came to my boss and said, we want to train people on relativity. And you have to set up a program on how to do that. And she said, well, why don't you go to Joseph? Because he's in charge of relative eDiscovery. So they sent me a note, we have to do this. And I sent a note back and I said, you mean like these training modules and this training session that we just did with Acorn? And they watched it and they reviewed everything that we had done. And they said, yeah, exactly like that. That's what we want. And I think that was the moment where it was like, what we were building to, James and I were building to, actually came to fruition when the business came to us and said, this is what we need. And we said, you mean what we have here and what we're ready to deliver? And I think that was the big thing of, for me, it was, I was on the right track and I was moving forward the right way from a perspective of the firm, saying, I thought this is what we needed. And that was kind of the validation. Yes, this is what we need. And let's move forward with this. So that was a big moment for eDiscovery here at Miller Johnson.
Yeah, we, you know, at eDiscovery conferences and webinars, you're preaching to the choir a little bit, right? Like everybody's there because everybody's passionate about using technology to be efficient. That's why they've made the effort to be on the call. And the question, you know, almost regardless of the topic, the question that almost always comes up is, yeah, but how do I convince the decision makers or stakeholders or whatever at my firm to believe what I'm saying, or my account or my company or my organization to buy into my vision and believe what I'm saying? Did you encounter resistance to the direction you wanted to take eDiscovery, or did you have to sell the gospel of eDiscovery internally?
Don't tell anybody, but I did it stealthily. It wasn't something that I overtly did and said, hey, this is what I'm doing. It was, I just forged ahead and did it. And nobody really knew what we were doing. Not that it was a bad thing. We only did it when we didn't have work that we were working on, and we did it as a process to enhance. And every step of the way, we made it easier for us, the eDiscovery team and the firm, to work with eDiscovery. But it was really, Zeph will say, you're patting yourself on the back, be quiet. But I honestly saw, unless we did something significant and pushed the boundaries and got ready for it, then we'd always be chasing. And I don't like to be always chasing. So we got out in front of it, and we created the training material, and we created the small case model, and we created all these different things. And then when the business came to, and all along we were chipping away at the business saying, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. And then when the business came back and said, okay, can you really do this? It was great to say, we already did, here you go. And it was kind of an incremental thing getting there. But we really didn't have any pushback, because it wasn't a case where I said, I need $100,000 to go do this, or I need $100,000 worth of time, or I need the commitment of, these 50, associates and members of the firm to invest in this. It was something that we were just kind of stealthily doing, a little bit by little bit, until we got to the point where, it was something that we could deliver on. And then we were asked to deliver, and we delivered. So it was great for us, great for the team to be able to be on point and on target at the right time.
Yeah, I think other than a sort of external event like COVID driving digital transformation suddenly overnight from the top down, which is kind of like supposed to be a once in a lifetime event, but it feels like once in a lifetime events are happening once in a decade lately. But other than that, I think that your approach is really the only way to consistently drive change in an organization.
Yep. Well, hopefully it's a sustainable growth, because I think eDiscovery and relativity and the area just has so much potential to make things more efficient for our clients, that the more our attorneys adopt it, and the more that the firm adopts it, and the more, as it would be great to get to a point where a case came in, and the attorney said, how do I get this into relativity to make my life easier, versus, what do I do? And having them think about that as the easiest path for me to get through these documents, to get through this process, using technology to be more efficient. That would be awesome. That would derive the most value, because that allows for the ability to put the right tools in place at the right time to meet the objectives of the client.
Yeah. I'll finish on this last question. So, you've come a long way. Where do you see yourself going with your eDiscovery program in the next few years?
Well, I think from a standpoint of the team that works with me, I would like to see them, you know, work to manage their own relativity space and to be able to move things in and out quicker, and to be able to manage cases and actually move and provide more value to the firm. Right now, they're not able to get in there and do some of the things that I know that they want to do. And from a growth perspective, I think the use of relativity will grow, but I think now, as you mentioned in the PowerPoint slides, I think the biggest thing is getting the team actually ramped up and the skill level ramped up and the certifications and that comfort level, that they feel like they're professionals in the space and that they're working as professionals in the space. I think that would be, from me, from a management perspective, I think that would be the greatest thing, is to have my team see themselves that way and grow those skills. I think if that happens and the confidence is there and those skills grow as they grow, we'll see more adoption of the technology and growth of relativity within the firm. So it's really hard to take a stick and whack people into something they don't want to do, but it's a lot easier to have that carrot and dangle it out there and pull them along.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us and spending the extra time with us. It looks like most of our participants wanted to keep hearing what you were saying. They stuck around. So thanks everyone for joining. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to some of our team members directly. And if you want to schedule that workshop for your firm or trade association or a small group of private individuals, please reach out to us. We're happy to train people on a 2-hour side-by-side in the environment experience. Talk to y'all later. Bye.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye now.